statement, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Secretary David Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'll update the House on negotiations between the United Kingdom and the European Union in November, reflecting our actions since the October Council. Both the United Kingdom and the European Union recognise a new dynamic instilled in the talks by the Prime Minister's Florence speech. At the October European Council, 27 member states responded by agreeing to start their preparations for moving the negotiations onto trade and the future relationship we want to see. And the Council conclusions also call for work to continue with a view to being able to move to the second phase of negotiations as soon as possible. It is, of course, inevitable that discussions are now narrowing to a few outstanding, albeit important, issues that remain. Last week, our focus was concentrated on finding solutions to those few remaining issues. As we move forward towards December Council, we've been clear with the European Union that we're willing to engage in discussions in a flexible and constructive way in order to achieve the progress needed. To this end, our teams are in continuous contact, even between formal rounds. I'll now turn to the three key ongoing areas of discussion and outline progress made last week in each of these. Now, we've made solid progress on our ongoing discussions on Northern Ireland and Ireland. Key areas of achievement include continued progress in technical discussions on preserving North-South cooperation, agreed joint principles on the continuation of the common travel area and associated rights, and drafting further joint principles on how best we preserve North-South cooperation under the Belfast Agreement to help guide specific solutions to unique circumstances in Northern Ireland. Both sides also remain firmly committed to avoiding a hard border, a point we've remained clear on throughout. We also remain resolutely committed to upholding the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in all its parts, and to finding a solution that works for the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland. We continue to hold frank discussions with our Commission counterparts about all these issues. But in this area, we've also had to be very clear with our Commission counterparts that whilst we respect their desire to protect the legal order of the single market and the customs union, that cannot come at the cost of the constitutional or economic integrity of the United Kingdom. As I've said, we cannot create a new border within the United Kingdom. This is an area where we believe we'll only be able to conclude talks finally in the context of a future relationship. Until such time as we do so, we need to approach the issues which arise with a high degree of political sensitivity, with pragmatism and with creativity. Discussions on these areas will continue in the run-up to the December Council. Now, we continue to make good progress on citizens' rights. Both sides are working hard towards resolution of outstanding issues. Last week, to respond to the request for reassurances by the European Union, we published a detailed description of our proposed administrative procedures for European Union citizens seeking settled status in the United Kingdom. As our paper demonstrates, the new procedures will be as streamlined, straightforward and low cost as possible. They'll be based on simple, transparent criteria, and these criteria will be laid out in the withdrawal agreement. While there remain differences on the issues of family reunion and the export of benefits, we've been clear that we're willing to consider what further reassurance we can provide to existing families of EU residents here, even if they're not currently living together in the United Kingdom. I believe this paves the way to resolving the remaining issues in this area, and this was acknowledged by the Commission on Friday. There remain some areas also where we're still seeking further movement from the European Union on issues such as voting rights, mutual recognition of qualifications, and onward movement for British citizens currently living in the EU 27. In all these three areas, the United Kingdom's offer goes beyond that of the European Union. Finally, the Commission has not yet matched the UK's offer in relation to the right to stand and vote in local elections. Now, this is a core citizens' right, nominally enshrined in the European Union treaties. And I've been disappointed the European Union has been unwilling to include voting rights in the withdrawal agreement so far. As a result, we will pursue this issue bilaterally with member states. This week we've also sought to give further clarity on our commitment to incorporate the agreement we reach on citizens' rights into UK law. This will ensure that European Union citizens of the UK can directly enforce their rights in UK courts, providing certainty and clarity for the long term. We've made it clear that over time our courts can take account of the rulings of the European Court of Justice in this area to help ensure consistent interpretation. However, we remain clear that as we leave the European Union, it's a key priority for the United Kingdom to preserve the sovereignty of our courts, and as such, in leaving the European Union, we'll bring to an end the direct jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. Mr. Speaker, it's not my intention to preempt the committee stage of the EU withdrawal bill, but what I say next does have some relevance for it. It's clear that we need to take further steps to provide clarity and certainty, both in the negotiations and at home, regarding the implementation of any agreement into United Kingdom law. I can now confirm that once we've reached an agreement, we'll bring forward a specific piece of primary legislation to implement that agreement. This will be known as a Withdrawal Agreement and Implementation Bill. This confirms that the major policies set out in the Withdrawal Agreement will be directly implemented into UK law by primary legislation, not by secondary legislation under the Withdrawal Bill. This also means that Parliament will be given time to debate, scrutinise and vote on the final agreement we strike with the European Union. This agreement will only hold if Parliament approves it. We expect this bill to cover the contents of the Withdrawal Agreement. That includes issues such as an agreement on citizens' rights, any financial settlement, and the details on implementation period agreed between both sides. Of course, we do not yet know the exact details of this bill and are unlikely to do so until the negotiations are near completion. I should also tell the House that this will be over and above the undertaking we've already made that we'll bring forward a motion on the final deal as soon as possible after the deal is agreed, and that we still intend and expect for such a vote on the final deal to happen before the European Parliament votes on it. There cannot be any doubt that Parliament will be intimately involved at every stage. Finally, on the financial settlement. Well, I see laughter from the benches opposite. Actually, this has been called for by members on all sides of this House. So I'd actually hope that we get Labour Party support for it for once. Now, finally on the financial settlement. The Prime Minister's commitment made in her Florence speech stands. Our European partners will not need to pay more or receive less over the remainder of the current budget plan as a result of our decision to leave. The UK will honour its commitments we've made during the period of our membership, and this week we made substantial technical progress on the issues which underpin those commitments. So there's been a low-key but important technical set of negotiations, falling as it does between two European councils. This is now about pinpointing further technical discussions that need to take place and moving forward into the political discussions and political decisions. We must now also look ahead to moving our discussions onto our future relationship. For this to happen, both parties need to build confidence in both the process and indeed the shared outcome. The United Kingdom will continue to engage and negotiate constructively as we have done since the start. But we need to see flexibility, imagination and willingness to make progress on both sides if these negotiations are to succeed and we are able to realise our new partnership. I commend this statement to the House, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance notice of his statement. It's clearly a statement of two halves, Mr. Speaker. First, the usual Groundhog Day report back on the negotiations in Brussels. A round of negotiations, a press conference at the end that leaves us wondering whether the parties were in the same negotiations, then both sides briefing the press in the days immediately afterwards, then a statement from the dispatch box that assures no one. Underlying this, a profound lack of progress. We want the next statement, Mr. Speaker, to be different. We want the Secretary of State to return and inform the House that real progress has been made, a breakthrough even. Last time we were promised acceleration. What now? And what's the plan if the December deadline is missed? Now, Mr. Speaker, I do recognise some of the difficulties, and as the Secretary of State knows, I have some sympathy with the position on Northern Ireland that he has set out. As we see from the legislation before this House today, the political situation in Northern Ireland is fragile. The peace process is too precious to be put at risk by rushing a Brexit deal that doesn't have the support of all communities. There must be no return to a hard border. And, Mr. Speaker, Northern Ireland should not be used by either side in the negotiations for political point scoring, and I think that's a really important point in this House. The second half of the statement is not a report back at all. It's a recognition by the government that it's about to lose a series of votes on the withdrawal bill. Labour has repeatedly argued since the bill was first published in July, that the Article 50 deal required primary legislation, including a vote of this House. A point that was made forcefully at second reading. Now, on the eve of crucial amendments, we have this statement under the cloak of a report back from Brussels. I don't think that fools anyone. The devil will no doubt be in the detail. But can the Secretary of State now confirm the government accepts Labour's argument that Clause 9 should now be struck from the withdrawal bill altogether? And then there's the question of transitional arrangements. Mr. Speaker, it's blindingly obvious to anybody following these negotiations that a final deal with the EU, including a trade agreement, will not be completed by March 2019, and that transitional agreements on the same terms as now are in the public interest. That's what businesses want, it's what communities want, it's what Labour's been calling for many, many months. So can the Secretary of State confirm, on the back of the statement he's just made, that the government will not stand in the way of sensible transitional arrangements on the same basic terms as we have now with the EU? Can the Secretary of State also confirm the government will not now be pushing amendments inconsistent with transitional arrangements? And can the Secretary of State confirm to this House that this House will get a vote in the event that there is no deal? Mr. Speaker, these questions have been pressing for months. This last-minute attempt to climb down brings them into very sharp focus, and we're entitled to clear answers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yet more carping opposite from the right honourable gentleman. He complains the negotiations aren't making as much progress as he'd like. Yet he allowed his Labour members of the European Parliament to vote against progress this time around. Yeah? The question he needs to ask himself is what would he be prepared to sacrifice in order to buy the goodwill of the European Commission? We're standing up for the UK citizens to move around Europe, to use their professional qualifications to vote in municipal elections. Is he seriously proposing we let them down in the interest of suddenly rushing ahead? We're standing up for British taxpayers and we're not wasting their money, with a clear position that we'll meet our financial commitments, but only once we know more about our future relationship. Would he sell them? Would he sell them out? Yes. Yeah? We're using Brexit to restore the sovereignty of the British courts. Would he let that go too? Yes, he would, because he'd give the European Court of Justice the right to dictate our laws in perpetuity. So let me come back to his description. The second half, he says, does not arise from the negotiation. Well, yes, it does, because actually one of the reasons for this bill that I've announced today is providing to European citizens a primary piece of legislation which will put into British law the withdrawal agreement in toto. So it's as near as we can come to direct effect. It comes directly out of the negotiation today, and I hope next time I come to report this House we'll get a little bit more support from the Labour Party.